My father didn't tell me how to live. He lived and let me watch him do it. Clarence Buddington Kelland, American writer. All right. Good morning. Welcome to another episode of the Liberty Dad podcast, a discussion on politics and culture, but not today. I'm your host, DL, America's most objective libertarian. If you're tuning in live, thank you so much for giving me your time so early. Today is Dad Talk Day. What is Dad Talk? What does that even mean? Well, Dad Talk is my series. I do it on Fridays. What I try to do is I try to bring on dads and we talk about what they want to talk about in the context of being a dad. Now, because I've been working out some equipment issues here, upgraded my laptop. I had it go down. I had a battery blow up on, not blow up, but I mean, got swollen on me. I'm not swole, but my battery got swole. But I swapped that out. I made some upgrades, and I was a little hesitant to start scheduling dads until I felt confident that I did it right. And so I don't have a dad today. Now, what I do on Fridays is I do one of two things, or maybe two things. I will have a dad on in the morning for this show at 7:30, or for those dads who got to get out and get to work early, take their kids to school, what have you. I will also do it at 6:30 Eastern time. That way we can try to accommodate as many dads as possible. Now, I was working with the dad and we almost were able to get it scheduled for tonight. Unfortunately, he was unable to make it. So we're going to delay that. So today we just have the morning show and there is no dad. And well, I mean, there's me, but there's no additional dad. So I decided, what do I do? Because I've got to have a show, right? And so I went through a bunch of posts over on this dad group. I think it's called Dads Helping Dads on Facebook. I went through and I just screenshotted a bunch of things that I thought I could respond to. And then I thought, I'll do that. And then, we could do some like AMA type stuff. Now, keep it related to dad. So if you're like, dude, tell me about the Epstein file. Nope, nope, not today. Today is dad stuff. So if I see any questions in there that are not related to being a dad, I'm just going to pretend like I didn't see them. So don't be angry. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do. And I think it'll be fun. And so that's what dad talk is all about. It's about raising dad voices to the best of my ability because I think dads are underappreciated in America. And my way of helping correct that is to elevate their voices, to bring them on or talk about their issues, just kind of carve out a little time from all of our argument and bickering and conspiracy theories about government and politics and culture. Set all of that aside and say, let's talk about dad stuff. Let's help each other. Yesterday I talked about if you want a better society, then you have to contribute to that better society. You can't ask and I know I'm kind of diving a little bit into politics here. You can't ask the government or some other entity to do it for you. You have to help create the society that you want. The society that I want is one where dads are respected, but we're also held to a high standard. So that's what Friday's all about. I will hold them to this standard, and I will do my best to edify other dads out there to the best of my ability. So let's go. Let's look at some of these. Now, what I did is on Facebook, you can post anonymously. So you could like have your name like Fred Jones, and then you could post anonymously. So it'll be like anonymous member. But where the men did not post anonymously, where they use their actual name, I just cut that part out of the screenshot as a courtesy. I mean, the dad group has like over 100,000 members, and it's not really. I mean, it's not really a private group. So, but at the same time, I'm like, maybe there's a dad out there that was thinking that the group was a little bit more private than it really is. So what I decided was like, if you're not anonymous, you didn't post anonymously, I cut your name out. just as a courtesy. We're trying to do right by dads here. So here's that first question, or first post that he made, that a dad made. He said, "Now, let me before I get to this, I didn't spend much. I just looked through them and I said, I think I can answer that,' and I just screenshotted it and went on to the next. That I didn't spend. So you're getting my answers about as raw as you can get here. All right. So I got a question for you, dads. Did you ever get bullied in school, and how did you deal with it? My stepson is lashing out at me on me and his mother, but that's a different topic for a different day. Okay. So I'm gonna make an assumption here that the stepson is lashing out, as part of being bullied. That's my assumption here. We're not going to address that. We're going to address like, okay, what about the bullied part? Because I'm not a big fan of bullies. When I was in school, yes, I got bullied, and it was pretty rough. Like, just to give you one story, when I was in like sixth grade, I think I was going to a Catholic school. So, like, I know that I trash public schools all the time, but private schools they have their bullies as well. So I was going to a Catholic school, and it was the day before Halloween. Halloween fell, or I don't know if it was the day before Halloween, but we were gonna all dress up the next day. And so several of the cool kids, they came up and they were like looking me up and down. They were like, doop, 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 doop. And I was like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, we're gonna dress up as a like a loser or a nerd or something like that. Nerd that in that time was not cool. Like today, if I'm like, dude, you're a nerd, people are gonna be like, yeah. Back then, that's not what happened. Like if you were a nerd, that was a negative thing. So they were like, "Yeah, we're gonna dress up like as a nerd or a loser or whatever. We want to make sure we get it right." I mean, that kind of stung. I'm in sixth grade, and there were plenty of other instances where the kids were making fun of me. And so here's how I personally handle it. I'm not saying it's necessarily a good idea, but here's how I handle it. I started making jokes back, and I didn't do it on purpose. It wasn't like this well thought out plan. I just was kind of at the end of my rope, and the kids were making fun of me at lunch one day, and I just started making fun back at me because making jokes back to them just didn't really work. It was more like because like one, it was like 4 or 5 or 6. I don't know how there was more of them than me. So like, yeah, I might get a joke on this one kid and get them to be quiet, but then one of their friends would have something snappy to say back. And so then they would, yeah, go, yeah, well, blah, blah, blah. And so it was just it was almost like a real fight. Like you might get a good punch on one kid, but then some other kid's gonna get one on you and you go back down. so it, you know, so I just made jokes about myself one day and we called it, I hate to do this, but I'm gonna do it. Back in my day, back in my day, we called it cracking. You was cracking on somebody. It's like making jokes about them, like your mama jokes. And they were like, he's cracking on himself. And they were bewildered. They didn't even they were like, "The hell's going on here? What in the world?" And so, and it just dawned on me like, "Oh, that got them to shut up." Now, I didn't continue just self-degradating. I didn't continue in that particular aspect. But, what I did do was became a real smartass. And then I learned that if you take jokes to a very uncomfortable place, people will shut up. And so I would do that. Like so for a good portion of my younger years and then also in my like 20s and 30s, like I would say things. I had that reputation of like he'll say something that we're all thinking or wish we hadn't thought. Right? Like I was bad. And and so I had to learn to dial it back down. Like, okay, you're no longer getting bullied. You don't have to do this. And the sad part is I couldn't even turn it into a comedy career because whenever I try to do scripted comedy, it's really, really terrible. It just falls flat on its face. It's like bam, like how's that? How's that? Like that, right? Maybe even the sad trombone if I can remember which button does that. But it's bad. So I don't do scripted comedy, and so it's like scripted comedy very bad, off the cuff. Who knows what he was gonna say, right? And it could be some of the wildest stuff that you ever heard. All right, so that doesn't really help you. Well, that might help your kids if you and I want you to think about it like this. I'm gonna make a cultural reference here. If you remember the movie 8 Mile with Eminem years ago, and maybe even go watch it if you haven't seen it. So in that movie, Eminem is portraying kind of portraying himself. He's this white kid that wants to be a rapper. Rap is all about in this movie, like you kind of get the sense that rap is largely about insult, like think of it as like insult comedy performed to a beat. And so they would go and battle each other and be like, "Oh yeah, well you're this and you this and blah blah blah," and then they would rhyme it. And then whoever could come up with, the wittiest insults, that were clever to a beat would be the winner. And so toward the end of the movie, one of his friends, B Rabbit, I think his name was B Rabbit. He was like, or no, it was just Rabbit. I'm sorry, it's just Rabbit. This guy was like, dude, are you afraid of what they're gonna say about you? And then you can kind of like see it in Eminem's eyes. It's like, oh, it dawns on him. So then he gets out there, and then his entire rap is about himself. And he's just like, and he ends it, and he's like, tell these people what something they don't know about me. And then the crowd goes wild. The dude's all like, "Man, I don't know what to say." Like in this movie, of course. But it's the same gist, right? And I think the lesson that we can take there is number one, get comfortable with yourself. Fine, have a laugh at yourself. Because if you can laugh at yourself, nobody really can get to you. And I'm 5'3" now. Well, I've been 5'3" since like, I don't know, sixth grade. Maybe I didn't grow quite that tall at sixth grade, maybe like seventh or eighth grade, but somewhere around there, I stopped growing forever. I stopped gaining any weight. I stopped building any muscle. I'm a 5'3", 120-pound scrawny guy. And I tell you, I am not afraid of like big dudes. And I have squared off, and I'm not saying it's a good idea, but I have squared off with big dudes, you know, where we're about to fight. I've squared off where we're just yelling at each other, like man to man, in a organization or something like that, screaming at each other, very angry. Like I am not afraid of people. And part of that reflects, this change when I was growing up being bullied and learning to be comfortable with myself. Like I just got over it. I was like, okay, well, everybody, like the whole world is bigger than me. So I can either be afraid of the whole world or I can move on. And so once I got comfortable with myself, the insults didn't work anymore. Now that's just if we're talking about insults, right? If you're talking about bullying, like physical, that's a different story. So how do you deal with that? I think it's the dad's a job to build confidence in their son and their daughter. Um, Let's see. Yeah, he's talking about his stepson here. So I think, and we'll just keep it with the son. So I think it's a dad's job um, to really build that confidence. How do you build the confidence? Well, there's a number of things that you could do, and there's no one or two or 10 things. There's just any number of things based on your kid. But let's just walk through some examples. Um, let's say they go out and they like playing out in the woods and stuff like that. So take them out, teach them to climb a tree, teach them to do things that are somewhat dangerous, that have some risk to them, and then push them a little bit past their limits. Because what needs to happen is they need to be confident in the world that's around them. That's a big key. Once you're confident in the world around you, you feel like you can take it on. Like you then the next challenge that you don't know what is, you will be able to confront. So take them out and, do that. Like my son, we recently learned how to ride. He least recent. I've known how he recently learned how to ride a bicycle, and it was a struggle for a bit. And because we got to the point where I could push him and get him a nice good start, and he would be able to pedal and keep going. Um, but then we were having a struggle with him pushing off because you have to push off, and then you have to quickly get your both feet on the pedal and start pedaling. Otherwise, you're going so slow you'll just tip over. And so we were having that struggle. And then the bicycle that he has these nice kind of fatter tires because it's a kid's bike. And so like there was this challenge, like, okay, if you're on the sidewalk, he was able to push off enough so that he could get a little bit of momentum to work with. But then he had to try to figure out how to get his feet on the pedal. So it was like, all right, well, if he didn't get his feet on the pedal, then he might fall over and hit the concrete. And he's a bit delicate. I'm not gonna lie about my son; he's a little bit delicate, and so the idea of him falling on the concrete is not so cool. So if we go on the grass, well, then it's kind of like the reverse now. Now he can fall and it's not going to hurt as much, but because it's grass and he's got these big thick tires, he can't push hard enough to get himself any momentum. So he doesn't get any momentum, but if and when he falls, it's not going to be so bad. So, so I had to really work with him, and he fell one time and he was crying, and I was like, "All right, get up, get up." He's like, "I need a Band-Aid." He's like got a couple scratches on his knee or whatever. He's like, "I need a Band-Aid." I'm like, "You can have a Band-Aid." I said, "But what I need you to do, I need you to get on your bicycle. I need you to just to ride around the yard one more time. Just one more time, son. Just do it one more time." And the reason I did that is for two reasons. Number one, um, I want him to, uh, I want him to learn the idea of getting back up and trying again. Right? Like that's what I want. I want him to have confidence. Like, crap, I didn't get it right. I could do it again, even if he falls and gets a scrape. I also want him to be able to, when he's playing with other kids and he inevitably gets a little scrape, just to get up, kind of shrug it off and keep going. But the other reason is I want the last thing that he remembers to be something positive. Right. So like if and then I can call up on that later. If I'm like, "Hey, you wanna go ride a bike again?" "Nah, last time I fell." Like, "No, actually, last time you got up and you rode around the rest of the yard. Remember that?" "Oh, yeah, you're right." So what I wanna instill in him, a positive the best of my ability, the most positive memory. So that's my advice. My advice is, yes, I was bullied. I do not tolerate the idea of bullying. So my son will never be a bully. He will face daddy's wrath if that were to ever come true. Nor will I allow him to be bullied, and we will take care of it. We are heading it off at the pass right now by putting him in jujitsu. And so he is in jujitsu class. I understand if some dads may not be in the budget, but there are other things that you can do. And the thing that you just have to keep in mind is like, what's going to build confidence? And you should know your kid, right? So you should know, like, what do they like? Do they like being outside? Do they like this? And then find what they like, what they're willing to do, and then push them a little bit further to the best of your ability. You don't need to be crazy. Like if he falls down on his bicycle, you don't need to be like, go kick the bicycle and be like, get up and be a man. Like he's not a man, he's a kid. So just remember that. But that doesn't mean that you can't push back a little bit and say, "All right, let's you can do this. I've got your back. I'm here with you." And if and there were a few times where my son was like, I was trying to push him past his limits and he just wasn't having it. And I was like, "Okay, I give." But you got to try. And then when you can get that past the limit, because let me tell you, that day where my son fell on his bicycle and I got him to go ride around, he went in, he got his Band-Aids. He came back out. He didn't want to, he was like, "I'm done riding my bicycle." I'm like, "Okay, he's going." And I said, "But we're going to try again later." And so later, like literally later that day, he came out and he got on it and it was like magic. He just pushed off on the concrete, on the sidewalk and then just went. And then all of a sudden he was like, Dad, look at this, Dad, look at me." And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Daddy's so proud of you." Right. And so like, I'm just praising the heck out of him because I'm like, "Dude, you like earlier today you fell and you needed like 12 band-aids for like what was barely a scratch, whatever. I can't say the words. Right. And he did. He wanted like six band-aids or something crazy. And then now look at you. You're like, bam, look at you just riding all over the place. And so now we ride around the neighborhood with the dog. Like I get on my rollerblades, I grab the dog, he goes, and it's kind of like a little race around the neighborhood. So, build confidence in your sons to the best of your ability with whatever you have available to you. You just got to be creative. All right. So there's that one. Let's go on to the next one here. Let's see here. Where's my mouse so I can click on to the next one here. I'll try not to be so verbose on these. I don't know if we'll get through them all, but we'll try. We'll get through as many as we can. All right. We'll do one more here, and then we're going to go. And by the way, AMA, ask me anything related to a dad. So once it's comment time, I will check in the comments, and I will be looking for things related to being a dad. So, all right. So here's this next one. And this one comes from anonymous member. How are y'all managing stress? I feel that since I've started my master's program, my patience has gone out the door. I've gained weight, lost hair. What? Lost hair? Bro, I feel you on that one. And I'm just genuinely not as happy as I was a few years ago. I like what I do for school and I'm almost done, but I feel like the relationship I had with my wife and kids isn't the same as it used to be because I have a difficult time managing stress. Brother, I feel you. I feel you, brother. There are days where my wife's like, all right, he's in a mood. I'll just let him be. And then I got to try to remember that I'm in a mood and not to be an ass. And it's, sometimes I win at that and sometimes not so much. So luckily I have a very patient wife. But how do we manage the stress? You have to make time for yourself. What do I mean by that? I don't mean like, okay, maybe let's say playing video games, shoot 'em up video game is your stress release. Make time for that. But here's the thing, you're not casually playing, okay? You are managing stress. So it has to be, you have to think of it like, I'm not just playing, this is me managing stress. And if the stress doesn't get managed, then you need to figure out why. Maybe you thought that was what you needed to do. And then you might realize, no, I just like playing video games. So now that becomes something for a different category. That's not that it's off limits. We're just talking about how do we deal with stress. So then you might say, okay, well, maybe I like to go outside and take a walk. I'll take a 1 or 2 mile walk around the neighborhood. And if that helps de-stress, then keep doing it, right? And you got to kind of cycle through, but you have to do that intentionally. You have to make time and you have to do it very regularly. So you can't just be like, all right, I'm super duper stressed and I'm about to choke everybody. So let me go ahead and take a walk because it may not be enough. You might have let yourself go too far into the stress category. So you got to kind of, maybe if you know you're about to you're working on your master's program. So maybe it's like, all right, between, let's just say it's a Saturday afternoon, and you're like, all right, between the hours of 2 and 4, I am working on my master's program, and I'm not going to be distracted by anything. I'm going to my office. Don't bother me. I'm going to be working hard, and I'm probably going to get frustrated by the way along the way because maybe I got some tough things I got to deal with. Okay, fine. Before you do that, go take your walk. If necessary, keep in mind where you are, and you might take a walk in the middle of it, right? And then at the end, you might also take a walk. And maybe you say, all right, instead of 2 to 4, maybe I need 2 to 4:30. And then you build in a half an hour walk in between, right in the middle, whatever. Now you can't necessarily do that with everything, right? Like if you're like, oh, well, going to the gym helps me de-stress. Well, you can't necessarily go to the gym, go and then, work on your master's program. And then in the middle of it, go back to the gym necessarily, right? Like that may not be feasible. So you're going to have to figure out like, how do I manage, like what kind of things go toward bringing down my stress levels? And then how can I incorporate these kind of things in here? Now, another thing I like to do, and I do this with my son and to some degree with my wife, I start and I just say, what kind of things can I completely ignore? And or maybe not ignore, but like, I don't need to worry about. The example I like to use is drawing on the wall. So once upon a time, my kid was not 6 years old. He was much younger and he was still exploring the world and he had no concept of things. And I said to myself, self, there will come a day when he's going to draw on the walls. This is a perfectly normal thing. That doesn't mean that's what we want him to do. It's just that if you go and you tell other parents, my child drew on the wall today, they're all gonna be like, "Yep, I remember those days." Like every parent has to go through it. So this is a very normal thing for kids to do, right? Whether you want them to do it or not is not the point. The point is it's normal, right? You're likely gonna go through it. So I decided if it's a normal thing, then I'm just gonna be like, all right, it's coming. Don't worry about it. And so the day that my son drew on a wall, I was like, "Ah, you drew on a wall. Now you got to clean it up. Here's a rag." And I didn't get mad because I was expecting it. I was like, "Yeah, this is going to happen." And it's okay that it's going to happen. Because I think one of the things that we do that allows ourselves to be really, really stressed out is that we tend to not rule out or account for the obvious. Or the things that we know are coming. Like when I first got married, I was like, "All right, my wife will be a pain in the butt sometimes, and I will be a pain in the butt back too, right? Like, but like she's gonna like that's just the nature of things. And like let's say I married somebody else, that wife would be a pain in the butt, right? It didn't matter who I was gonna marry because it's somebody else. There's gonna be a day when they do something that I don't like or I'm not in the mood for, right? Like I'm just like all right, I'm not in the mood for this for your attitude, for your whatever, like there will be days. So I have to recognize like, all right, this will happen. I'm not gonna flip out about it. I'm gonna be ready. And part of being ready for it is knowing that it's coming and recognizing it and just kind of saying to yourself, like, yeah. I'm okay with that. It's fine. I may not like it when it happens, right? But I'm okay that it happened because I know it's going to happen. And so I'm again, what you're trying to do is you're trying to separate and say, here are the things in life that I can anticipate, and I'm going to kind of be ready for them. And then there's going to be all these things that I cannot anticipate, and those might be things where I'm going to have to try to deal with the frustration in the moment. And if I have them all in one big basket, if you will, um, then I might just be feeling the same way about all of them. But if I can separate them and say, all right, these ones I'm going to kind of anticipate, and here's kind of how my response is going to be when they happen, no big deal. And then whatever these things are, they're all question marks. I don't know what they are yet. I'll deal with that when the time comes. And some of them I'll do well with, and some of them I won't. Well, if I can reduce the things that I allow to be a stressor in the first place, then that's going toward managing my stress. Because at the end of the day, we want to overall be happy. Um, there will be times you won't. I read a book by Dr. Weil. Yes, Dr. Weil. He does integrative medicine, and he points out that happiness is a normal human emotion. So is sadness, and so is anger. These are normal human emotions, and it's okay to feel them. Right now, it's how we engage in them that matters. Like if you just get mad and you start yelling at the kid and kicking the dog and slapping the wife around, you have poorly responded with this anger. But if you get angry and you're like, I need a few minutes, and you go in your room and you're just like, let's just say that you're cussing at everybody under your breath, but they're not hearing it, like, fine. I think that's an appropriate way of managing your stress. Like you're getting it out, but you're not getting it out in such a way where you're damaging relationships with other people. And so some people journal, right? You can write in a journal. You could be like, all right, like I've done that in the past. I'm like, all right, this is my journal. It's where I put my frustrations out. Don't read it because, like I might be saying something mean about you, but I'm doing it just to get it out. And then when I come back to you later, this is what I told my wife. I was like, when I come back to you later, I'm going to be calm and rational. I'm not going to, say the things that I initially was thinking. Right. And she respects that. And so you've got to figure out like, how do I manage stress? And that's another thing that you can work out. Like, what do I do when all of a sudden something happens and I'm hit with it and my anger just bam right there. Well, like some things you cannot worry about. Like if I'm working on a project, like I'm trying to install a dishwasher and things aren't going right and I drop some F bombs, I'm not too worried about that. That one I can let go. Right. Okay. If that happens, whatever. Um, Throwing some F bombs is fine. Throwing the wrench across the house and breaking a window is not fine. Right. So, so allow yourself to express your stress in a way that's not damaging to those around you. But then also head it off as much as you can by separating things that you don't need to be stressed about in the first place because you can anticipate them and you can just be like, okay, yeah, this is going to happen. Yep. Some days my wife's going to come in and she's going to be in a mood and she's going to be, complaining about this and complaining about that. And that's part of life. And so there's no reason for me to be angry about that. Right. And so this is how you manage some of the stress and then start figuring out, okay, what kind of things can I do to de-stress and how can I implement them into my routine? What makes sense? What's going to work for me? Because what works for you and what works for me won't be the same. Like one of the things that I used to do a lot is I would go cycling. That was my like when I was just like because I could get out on the road. I always thought of it like this: what's a good way to identify something that helps you de-stress? Something that you can do and you forget about everything that's going on. So when I would go out cycling, I would just be like, now at first I'd be in my head, cursing and carrying on about whoever or whatever. And but eventually I get to the point where I'm just cycling and I'm enjoying it and I'm having, a good time. I'm feeling, I'm feeling the wind on my face, I'm paying attention to the cars and everything that's around me, I'm whatever. I'm just I'm into it. I'm focused on all the things that are going on with my cycling, so it's such that I've now lost sight of whatever it was that was making me angry or stressed. So to me, that's a good identifying factor in what helps you de-stress. And then I can come back and be like, all right, Now I've got a more cool, calm, collective head. Let me deal with the situation. So that's how you manage the stress, guys. Make sure you do that. Again, very, very important. Do not allow your stress to negatively impact those around you the best you can, because guess what? That will just cause more stress. So don't do that. All right, let's get to some questions. Let's see if you guys have me. Let's do some AMA here real quick. So we're gonna get our cool little music here. All right, there we go. We got our cool music here. All right. Oops, not that button. the the crickets was still going from earlier. I don't know what happened there. All right, let's see what we got. Um do. I'm gonna answer this briefly, but it kind of violates the rules, guys. How will a dad's life change after today's announcement that Elon and Doge have fired hundreds of weather forecasters at NOAA? It won't, because I don't check the weather anyway. Ask my wife. I don't. Like, at best, I'll be like, Alexa, what's the weather? And then I usually don't pay attention anyway. And then I step outside and I'm like, man, it's kind of cold. I better go get a jacket. So it's not going to affect me at all. Let's see what else we got. Do. Joe says DL can lift more than I can. I don't know about that. Might have had one good moment. If you know, you know. Let's see. There's that show, Wild 'N Out, with Nick Cannon, is based on insults back and forth. That Liberty lady says. I know who Nick Cannon is, and I think I remember that, but I don't recall the show. But hey, there's lots of shows out there. Let's see. Oh yeah, that Liberty lady says perfect time to introduce the Mr. Clean magic eraser for the markers on the wall. You know, my wife loves those things, and I absolutely hate them. I'm like, I almost view them as like garbage. I know they kind of work in some contexts, but there have been several contexts where I don't remember off the top of my head which ones, but I've been several instances where I've tried to use them and they just didn't work at all. And I just was so annoyed because it was like the packaging makes it sound like it's just like this magic thing, like literally magic, right? But hey, like each their own. My wife loves them, I don't. And that Liberty lady likes them, so maybe it's a woman thing. I don't know. Are we allowed to be sexist on this podcast? Let me ask myself. Can we? Yes, we can. Okay. All right. Let's see here. All right. I think that's good. We're going to go to a quick break. We'll come back. We'll do a couple more questions here. And not questions, but a couple more things. Okay. I don't know why it's not stopping. Uh, I was trying to set up that music so that it would cycle. And then I think I clicked the wrong thing. But anyway, let's go to a little quick intermission here, and then we'll be right back. We'll answer a couple more of these posts from the dad group. Hey, Liberty fam, do me a favor. If you enjoy the show, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button to my channel. And for the really serious folks out there, I want you to hit that bell so that you never miss an episode. By the way, if you want to support the show, head over to libertydad.locals.com and sign up. For $5, you can be part of this show. There, I'll engage supporters of the show. We'll discuss topics that you want me to talk about, response videos that you would like to see, or anything related to the show. And I'll even have a monthly subscribers only episode. By the way, I'm always looking for dads to join me for Dad Talk. That's my series where I invite everyday dads on to talk about what's important to them in the context of being a dad. No argument, no debate, and dads choose the topic. It's my way of raising dad voices. If you're a dad or you know a dad who has something to say, let's get connected. Episodes air live on Friday mornings or Friday evenings, whichever works best for dads. All right, let's get back to the show. All right, we're back, and I've picked my next one. I'm not gonna be able to go through all the ones that I selected, which I guess is good. Better to have too much material than not enough. So let's get to this next one here. So this is oh, you know what? Let me quickly make an adjustment here. I left a name on there, so there we go. All right, so I'm just gonna I'm doing this behind the scenes. You can't see it. It's like all the magic behind the scenes that you wish you could see. So there we go. All right. So this dad says, I'm not asking. Oh, hold on. Wait a second. There we go. He says, I'm not asking for money. That isn't what this is. I just need to vent. Stop right there. Yes. Sometimes men need to vent. That's okay. I get it. Sometimes I get with my buddy, like this is like the man talk. Like when we're out by the fire with our cigars and our beers, my case, a wine, which really kind of sounds pretentious, but I don't drink beer. But when we're out by the fire hanging out and we're just like, it's like, oh man, I can't believe it. Actually, I tell you what, remember the scene from, what's that Clint Eastwood movie where he's the old man with the Asian neighbors? Gran Torino. So remember the scene in Gran Torino where he's teaching the young kid how to be a man. He's like, "All right, you walk into the barber office or the barber's office. You walk into the barber shop and he's like he walks in, he's like, "You old dirty man, well, how the F you doing? Blah, blah, blah," right? And he's like, "Yeah, yeah." And so then he's teaching the kid comes in, basically insults him, and he's like, "You can't do that." So then the kid comes in, he gets it right. He's all like, "Yeah." He goes, "Man, I took my car to the mechanic and he overcharged me, blah, 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 and this and that. It's going, that's venting. That's just venting. And it's like where I'm expressing some frustration with probably normal things. And then other men are like, yeah, I totally get you, bro. Yeah, yeah. Then mechanics, hopefully no mechanics are watching, but they're like, those mechanics are always trying to, they're trying to screw you over. Right. And so like, yes, venting is a good thing. Just be careful who you vent it to. Make sure that that you're venting, and I hate to say it this way, but in a safe space, right? And your wife is probably not a safe space unless it's about something entirely different. Like if it's about the family, your wife is not go find your buddy. That's your safe space, right? You don't, you really, you're not going to vent about the kid to your wife per se, because she's going to basically, her job effectively is to, you know, be like, okay, you're complaining about the kid. I'm going to take the kid's side probably. Right. Now you might have a more astute wife, but like in general, like I would not vent to the family about the family. If you want to vent about your boss to your wife, that's cool. Right. Or your spouse, whatever. So for me, that's just my rule of thumb. All right, so let's continue. I've screwed up financially. I'm way into debt, but I've been managing it. It all caught up to me this week. My account is overdrawn by over 300. I have little food in the house for the kids. Gas is running out. I've been fighting for what feels like forever. I can't keep going like this. I feel more hopeless than I've ever felt. Even when I make it to my next check, I know it will just be gone. What's the point? I'm stretched to my absolute limit. What do I do? What can I do? I've run out of options. My mental health is gone. My financial health is gone. I'm not sure what to do. Sorry for rambling. For remember, we are a community here, like society. It's on us to help each other out. Now, there's no requirement per se. I'm not going to legally bind anybody to doing this. I'm just saying, like, if you want a good community, or that you build the community that you want, or you might think of it this way: what goes around comes around. You help out people when you're doing well, mentally at least, and then it comes back to you. This is not to say that you should go and pay somebody's bills. I'm just saying, like, we got to be there for each other. So this is me trying to be there for each other. Number one, the thing that sticks out is my mental health is gone. As long as you're not tending to your mental health, the rest of this is going to keep going awry. It's going to continue because you are not in the right mindset to be able to manage this. So I would say if you have a good buddy that you can talk to clear your head, then do that. Start there, right? Now, what do I mean by a good buddy? For me, I've got some friends that I can go to and talk to, and if they disagree with me, they'll be like, "Nah, DL, that ain't it." And they're not gonna be they're not gonna hear, they're gonna stand firm on that, right? They're not, but at the same time, if they feel like I'm in the right, then they'll acknowledge that as well. So your good buddy can't be the guy who's either for sure is going to give you crappy advice. Like, put it this way: imagine you go to your buddy and you're like, "Man, my wife's this," and he's like, "Man, you need to put a squash to that. You need to tell her what's up. You need to show her your pimp hand. Keep it strong. Like, let that. I mean, you can keep that buddy, but don't go to him for advice, right? Like, he's not giving you good advice. At least not in that context. Maybe he'll give you good advice on fixing your car, but your relationships, no. So find you a buddy that has some wisdom to him, and use him for starters. Now, let's say you don't have that buddy. Like, man, all my buddies are still stuck in, their 30s, and they're out partying, and they're treating they're treating the world as if it's still college. Okay, so now you're on your own. You still have to manage your mental health. So now we go back to earlier when I was talking about, like, okay, how do you deal with your stress? Because these are all, this is basically the advice that I gave for stress is going to basically apply here. Okay, so you need to manage that stress. You need to get yourself into a clear-headed state. If you're not in a clear-headed state, how are you going to fix any of this? How are you going to find an answer? You can't. I mean, you might, right? But you can't count on it, because if you're in a if your mind is in a disheveled state, then what's going to happen is, if you find a good answer, it will be out of luck, not out of any kind of skill or intention, right? And so you have to make sure that you're doing things intentionally. So the first thing you have to do is, like, all right, let me get my mental health in order. How do you do that? Maybe you go for a walk. Maybe you take a run. Maybe you confide in a buddy. There are so many things. And now, obviously, if we're talking about, hey, I'm in a financial situation, then everything has to be free. Maybe you go to a pastor, right? Maybe you go to a church and you say, "Look, I'd like to talk to somebody. I'm frustrated, and I have nobody to talk to." And you need to find somebody that's willing to talk to you. Now, I'm going to say this, and my Christian friends might get mad at me, but when you go to a church, you need to let them know, like, look, you like, I like, if you're not religious, you might say, "Hey, I know you're going to want to solve my spiritual problem, but right now, I really need help on my physical problems, my mental problems. Can you focus on that?" Because if they're not willing to do that, then find another church. Right? Or you can find some organization. I don't know what other organizations might be, but there might be an organization that you've heard about, that somebody's, whatever. But make sure that the person that you're going to is there to help you with what you've brought, because it's just going to simply be more and more frustrating to you if somebody's like, "Yeah, but let me tell you about Jesus." Like, no, like I get it. You want to tell me about Jesus, and I'm not trashing my religious peers. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying we need to focus on the mental part first. Help solve the problem that's right in front of them, that's consuming all of their time. If I'm in a situation where I don't have much food for my kids, I don't have any gas, I know that my next paycheck's already spent, I'm stressed out, I don't know which way to go, I don't have any money, I don't have any options to get more money, and, like, look, I'm just gonna be real, and if you're like, "Yeah, but just come to Jesus." Look, you no, I'm not interested. And so that's what I mean by that. And again, I'm not trying to trash my Christian peers. Like, there's a time and a place for everything. But right now, this man needs help with what we're seeing right here. That's what we need to focus on. And so if you are that guy, make sure you make it clear in a very respectable manner. Don't walk in and be like, "Don't tell me about no Jesus stuff." Just walk in and be like, "Look, I'm in a place, and I could really use some guidance. And I really need you to focus on the things that I'm facing that I wake up, and they're just, maybe I'm barely sleeping because I'm so busy. I'm so stretched to my limit in my mind. I can't think of anything else. Help me with this." Okay. As far as money goes, then you have to work out a plan. Now, I can't offer advice on this because there's not enough information. How much money are you making? What are your expenses? What is your daily routine? What do you have available at, to work with? Do you have some bicycles and you like bicycling? You just haven't done it in a while? I don't know. Right? Like, I don't know a lot out of this story. So in terms of finances, the best advice that we could say is, you need to start working out a plan. Now, what I would probably do, if you have the opportunity and you're struggling with your finances, is start listening to somebody that's a notable, I don't want to call them financial guru, but they're notable in the financial space, to give advice. So like a Dave Ramsey or one of those type of people, because that's what they do. like the Dave Ramseys of the world. And there's like Dave Ramsey, there's Caleb Hammer, there's several others. I don't remember their names off the top of my head. Those two, they really focus on finances. And if you pay attention to them, like Caleb Hammer brings on people to his show, and then he just kind of almost it's almost like beating them into submission because they come in with all their excuses and he just beats down on the excuses that they give, right? But some of those excuses may be your excuses. So, if you have an opportunity, maybe start listening to these shows and just try say, "Oh yeah, you know what? This element of this person's life applies to me. Let me see what the Caleb Hammer or the Dave Ramsey is saying about dealing with this." Right? This is how you get some advice. And these shows are free. So you can listen to them. All you need is a little bit of time. So if you have a few moments, while you're cooking dinner, on your drive to work or your drive home, or maybe you're taking a walk, you can put some earbuds in, right? And you can listen to, you listen to one of these shows as you're going along, right? Like these are ways that you can get some ideas. It also might be ways to kind of take your mental space and distract it a little bit, because if you're just walking with nothing, no music, no podcast, then all you've got is your mind and what's in it. And that may not help, your walk may not help you de-stress a little bit and get to a point where you've got a more clear head. So I would recommend this, find people that you can confide in. If you've got a good buddy that's generally got good advice and isn't giving garbage advice, and we all know what good advice looks like and sounds like, right? We generally have a good idea. If your buddy is just basically siding with you all the time and telling you that the rest of the world is terrible, that's probably not good advice. It's not necessarily a bad buddy, but it's not going to get you out of this. You can also go out again to find a church, and what are they going to offer? Maybe they've got somebody there that's an accountant that can sit down and work with your finances and be like, all right, here's some recommendations for you, right? And then we would hope that you would come back. And a good church, I hate to keep harping on this, but I want to make sure that people are, when they go out, they're getting good advice. Skip your buddy that's just going to be talking trash about your wife or your girlfriend or whatever, and tell you need to have more beers or something. Skip that buddy. Skip the church that's just going to that wants to focus on spirituality, because right now you're looking for help and you need good quality help. And if you're not getting it from your buddy, find some other buddy. If you don't have a buddy, go to a church, find them. And there are churches galore, so you should be able to find a church that's going to say, yeah, we get it. And we hope you'll come back, but we understand you need a little bit of help in this particular space right now. We've got somebody that's got good advice. They can, and they're willing to sit down with you. And then also seek out podcasts of notable people. Don't listen to like, if it's a small podcast of 100 people, that may be a good podcast and it may not be. But if you're in a struggle like this, you may want to go for one of the big dogs to begin with, just because they have a better reputation that's already been built over time. So, again, we're trying to find the best quality of information in the shortest amount of time to get you where you need to be as quickly as we can. So that's my recommendation on this. But absolutely, number one has to be your mental health right there, where it says, my mental health is gone. You cannot fix your financial health. You cannot fix any physical health. You cannot fix anything else if your mental health is trash. So focus on your mental health. Find people that will help you with that, and then find people that can specifically help you with the other areas that you're struggling with. All right, let's see. What do we got next here? Where's my mouse? Let's go to the next one here. So this one's interesting. So this one comes from an anonymous person. Now, let me read this first before I start. Any tips on dating a girl with an 8-year-old son? I don't think it's right stepping in, raising someone else's son. The dad's in his life very regularly. So, okay, I do not, nor have I ever dated a woman with a child. I don't think I have. No, I haven't. I had to think about. I'm pretty sure. Like, yeah. So you're like, well, DL, how can you give any advice on this? Because all my advice comes from either my experience or my observations about things. In watching what happens in the world and seeing like, oh, look, that does work, or no, this doesn't work. So let me start with number one here. I don't think it's right stepping in, raising someone else's son. Okay, number one, you're talking about dating somebody. So if if it's early on in the relationship, you don't need to be worried about raising somebody's kid. You need to be worried, not worried, but you need to focus on dating, getting to know this person. Is this person somebody that I might have a long-term relationship with? That's first and foremost, because, maybe they're not the kind of person, maybe it just isn't going to work for you, right? Maybe they're very independent and you want somebody that's less independent. Maybe they're less independent and you would like somebody that's more independent. Maybe they're into a whole bunch of things that are really, really important to them that are not really important to you. And it's to the point where, hey, it's just not going to really make for a good relationship. You need to figure that out first. So first and foremost, relationship. Figure that out. And in the early stages, you don't need to be worried about the kids. The only thing that you need to consider in the early stages are, would I be comfortable with a long-term relationship, presumably married, uh, with somebody that has a child already? If the answer is no, then this question is pointless. Then just move on. If you're like, no, I don't even want to have anything, then don't bother. Because at the end of the day, if there is a long-term relationship, you will in some respect be a figure in their life. You may not be their dad, you may not be their father per se. You might be stepdad, but you will be a figure in their life. So either you're willing to do that or you're not. And so if that's out, then move on. No harm, no foul, and you don't have to be rude about it. Just be like, yeah, you're not really the kind of person I'm looking for. But if that's on the table, cool. Now you focus on the relationship. You focus on, like, let me get to know this person. Is this, who is this person? Do we get a spark that lasts over time? All right. Now the dad's in his life. This isn't always the case, and it can be tricky. Here's what I've observed. Number one, it's very infrequent, in my opinion, from what I've observed. It's very infrequent that a man can come in and have a long-term relationship with a woman who has a child, and early on in the relationship try to be the dad. Like, try to, especially when it comes to discipline. Like, usually if you come in and you're like giving some presents or stuff, like it's a birthday and you're like, oh man, here's some Legos or something like that. Like, usually the moms don't get too mad. But if the son's doing something like that he's not supposed to be doing, and then you try to reprimand him, that's where you get in trouble a lot. So first things first, you figure out, is this a person that I can have a relationship with? Then number two, if you decide that you're going to move forward with a long-term relationship, then you start talking about, where are we in how we respond to the son? What are my boundaries that are acceptable to you? Because, see, my wife and I, we had our son from the very beginning. We didn't really have to have a conversation about, are you going to be a dad in his life, and to the point where, you deal with the good and the bad. That was assumed. But we did have to have conversations about, how do we want to parent? Because we have to be on the same page. Now, when I was growing up, my mom had me, and then she met who is my dad now. So technically, in the strictest sense, he's my stepdad, but I call him dad because he married my mom when I was 3 and adopted me. So as far as I'm concerned, he's dad, because I don't remember anybody else ever. I have like no memory of anybody else. So he's my dad. But he still had to work out, like, okay, what are the boundaries in this relationship with this kid that I did not contribute to bringing about to this world, right? Because there is, at least early on, there is that separation that has to be worked out. And in any relationship, you have to figure out, what are we both going to be on the same page? So I remember my mom was telling me that I used to be a really smart aleck, and I would say, she said that when I was a kid, I was a bully when I was a kid. And she took care of it the old fashioned way. I guess one day I was like, I hit a kid or something like that with one of the Tonka trucks, and she came over and took the Tonka truck and hit me with it. And then she said, "You never bullied anybody again," old school ways, whatever. But I was a real smart aleck, and I would, say mean things to my new dad. And my mom was like, you need to slap him upside his head one of these days. And he was a little hesitant to do it. But then I guess one day he did. And then that was the end of that. Like, then all of a sudden I started treating him like he was my real dad, I guess. So, but but he did that with my mom's consent, right? So they were on the same page. They were now parents. It wasn't like stepdad, mom, it was parents. And that's the goal that you're aiming for. How do we become parents? But again, this is only after you've determined, yes, being with a woman who already has a kid is on the table. Yes, this is a person that I'd like to have a long-term relationship who also wants a long-term relationship with me. Once you've worked that out, then you can start working. How are we going to be parents? Because children need parents that are not divided because they're already going to try to divide you, right? Like we all have heard the stories. Kid comes in, "Hey, mom, can I do this?" Mom says no, goes over to dad, late, in a different room. "Dad, can I do this?" "Sure, son." Right. And then later the wife finds out like he was doing, the mom finds out that he was doing this thing. Like, I told you no. Well, dad said yes. They totally played you guys. Right. And so then the question, so how do we head that off? Well, a good parent will be astute to this. And then, what'd your mom say? What'd your dad say? Right. Like, that's what I want to know first because I'm probably going to agree with them, whatever they said. And that's what happens sometimes. Like my son will be like, "Dad, can I watch TV?" And we'll be in the room with maybe with mom, and I'll say, "Mommy, are you okay with this?" And she'll say, "Yes, I am." Or sometimes she'll say, "He needs to clean his room," like maybe something I didn't think about, right? And she'll do the same thing. We are on the same page. So when you're talking about raising somebody else's kid, or you may not raise him and be the dad if he's got an active dad in his life. Maybe mom and dad are separated. They got split custody and dad's actually a good dad. Cool. That's awesome. You will still be a figure in that kid's life. So then what you need to work out in this particular case, you need to work out first and foremost, all right, what are the boundaries between me and mom? Because that's who you're living with. Then you need to kind of say, all right, what are some appropriate boundaries with dad? Because I believe that it is absolutely imperative that when you have a split relationship like this, when you have like a mom and a dad who are split up, and then one or both of them now has a new girlfriend, spouse, whatever, they all need to be on the same page in as much as they can be. There'll be some differences, and that's just the way it works. But you got to be on the same page in as much as you possibly can, because otherwise you start getting into conflict in one way or another. And you want to try to avoid unnecessary conflict. Now, here's my big rule, my absolute big rule. And I do this with my family, like as an uncle. You never, because let me back up a little bit. My son is 6 now, but once upon a time, I didn't have a son. And so therefore, I was just that cool uncle, if you will. And my sister and my brother had kids. So I would make sure that when it came time to birthdays and Christmas and whatever time where gifts are given, I never ever upstaged them ever. So I never bought a nicer gift than they bought ever, right? Because I want to make sure that they always respect their parents and what they get from their parents. And it was easy for me because to do that because I didn't have any kids. There were like I don't have the added expense of a child. I also don't have the experience of understanding these kind of things. So it's very easy to be like, "Oh, well, I just thought this was cool, so I bought it." So I actively thought, "Okay, like what are they getting? Okay, I will get something equal or less to make sure that I never upstage them." You never ever want to upstage somebody else's dad ever, or the mom if it was a situation that way. You never want to upstage them, right? We've all seen it in the movies. That dad starts, maybe in this particular case, the guy's dating a woman. She's got an 8-year-old son. He's doing very well in his career. He's got a lot of money, a lot of resources at his disposal. The dad's doing okay, but he's not as well off as this new boyfriend. Okay, if that's the case, do not upstage dad ever. You will create problems and they're unnecessary and you will be at fault. So never ever do that. You don't do it in as much as you can anywhere else, right? Like um if the dad can't take the kid on a really fun camping trip, then maybe you don't, or maybe you work it out with the dad and you say, "How do we do this thing so that your kid still has a lot of respect for you?" Because at the end of the day, if this situation turns into a long-term relationship, the girl and the guy get married. You have a 3 adult parenting relationship. I don't know if that's the right. There are 3 parents here. They all have to coordinate the best they can. And the best thing that you can do is make sure that child respects all of them in a proper way. You never want the kid to be like, "Yeah, my stepdad's so much more cooler because he's got all the money, or because he takes me on all the fun trips and he does all the things." So you have to learn to balance that out. But again, you're not trying to raise somebody else's son unless they're not there. So in my dad's case, he was raising somebody else's son, and he did a damn fine job of it as well, right? But that's because my biological dad was not there. Don't know anything about him. I mean, maybe a little bit, but not too much, right? And so he's never been present. If he showed up at my doorstep today, I'd be like, "Oh, that's nice." At best, I'd be like, "Oh, you live a long life. Maybe I will too," right? That's about as far as it's going to go for me. So that's my tips. Okay. So I'm going to repeat them one more time so we get it, because I see these relationships go south so fast all the time. Number one, is it on the table? If it's not, don't bother. Quit wasting people's time. It's not acceptable. Number two, determine first, foremost, whether or not this is going to be a long-term relationship. And a good mom will not introduce you to her kid early on. Sorry, moms. I've seen a lot of you do it. You introduce your kid to every boyfriend you get and they get confused. Stop doing it. That's wrong. Right? So a good mom will be like, "Yeah, you don't get to meet my kids until we have established a relationship, until I have determined that we are a thing and that it's appropriate to introduce you to my kid." Right? I knew a woman one time, she said, "Look, I love going out and I like sometimes meeting men and sometimes I might go home with them." She goes, "But they never come home because I'm not letting my kids see that." Now we could talk about whether or not she should be going home with men, but the fact of the matter is she was at least doing right by her son by not bringing in strange men repeatedly over and over and over. Okay. So do not do that. All right. But anyway, we're talking about the men here. So number two, you're determining whether or not there's an established long-term relationship. Number three, in this particular case, the dad's in his life. So once you've determined that there's going to be a long-term relationship, then you start working out some of the details so that the child understands that all three of you are working together to the best of your ability. It's not going to always be 100%. There will be things that you disagree on, and that's okay. There are things that my wife and I disagree on, and we work those things out. But this is the path that you want to take. And then you never, ever try to upstage dad. You always try to make sure that dad gets to be, because you are the stepdad. And if dad's in his life, respect it, right? It doesn't mean that you can't be in his life. And maybe that's a great thing. Maybe he gets, a little bit of advice from you and a little bit of advice from his dad, and then, some advice from his mom. And then he grows up and becomes a very healthy young man. Perfect. Love it. Love the idea of it. So it can be done, but you got to do it the right way. And you got to remember, these kids are watching every move that you make. They are going to emulate you one day, or their behavior is going to reflect how you behaved if it's different behavior. So be mindful. All right, let's get to some last comments here. And then we will head on out for the day. So let's see here. Let's get my music back. There's my music. I think it does play on repeat now, but like if I hit the button, it just restarts something. I don't really know. I'm going to work on that. I got a lot of things to work on. All right, let's see here. All right, that Liberty Lady is gone, but in her absence, we have to dip out early. Have a great weekend and see you Monday. Yes, see you Monday and see every one of you fine folks Monday once we close the show out. All right, that's it. There's no other comments here, so we can go ahead and just get right to the closing. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Hope you enjoyed the show. You're going to have to work on them AMA. There's not too many questions in here for me. But hey, it's all good, all fun. And have a great one. Where's my closing? There it is. Bam. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. Be sure to catch me Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. for an informed discussion on politics and culture. Make sure that you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, or if you prefer my Rumble channel, you can go to youtube.libertydad.com, or you can go to rumble.libertydad.com. While you are there, let me know how I'm doing by leaving me a comment. You can also become part of the community by heading over to libertydad.locals.com. Remember, if you're a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week. Catch you next time. But for now, I'm out.